What's up, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this session of the BackWoods, where we discuss the good, the bad, and the hilarious of our outdoor adventures. Joining me in the woods today is a true mountain man, Ray Livingston from Mud, Sweat, and Beards. My name is Daniel Turnipseed, and you're listening to the BackWoods. All right, guys, joining me right now via video call is Ray Livingston. Before we get too far into this, I just wanted to say welcome to the podcast, Ray. It's awesome to have you on.
Thank you.
Before we get too far into like the nitty-gritty of outdoor adventures and funny stories, for the viewers who don't know who you are, would you be able to give them a little bit of background info, like who is Ray Livingston?
Who is Ray Livingston? I tend not to like stereotypes or labels. I'm just a dude that's living his best life daily. And that's taken me on some pretty awesome adventures. I've been on the Alone show on season 6. A little show on Nat Geo called to the Wild, which was wilderness survival with a dog. Really cute show, fun to do. Mud, Sweat, and Beards. And then I'm working on another television project right now.
All right. Well, that being said, how did you get discovered for all of these TV shows? Because I know you said you were like just mainly wanting to do this for self-sustained survival if something happened. Crazy world we live in, so that's a good thing to learn. But how did you get discovered by these television networks?
Oh, it was through my Facebook page, really. I like sharing my adventures. I go out and I see a lot of cool stuff, and so I just record, take pictures, and share them, and to show people what I'm doing, and to help people get out and enjoy nature a lot. And then it seems that one of the casting people liked what they saw, and they reached out to me to see if I was interested in doing Alone. And after I hadn't even seen the show at that point, and after I watched a few episodes, I was like, yeah, I would enjoy doing that. I felt woefully unprepared, but I went out there, and I feel that I'd put in a good effort, and then they just kind of keep coming, and I don't know, I've just put out good love and light and good energy and try to help and inspire people, and for me that has translated into manifesting a lot of other opportunities.
That's pretty crazy because you wouldn't think just posting stuff on your social media page would get that much attention. And going into this, I was thinking Ray's been on Alone, so I was in my mind thinking that you casted yourself to be on the show. And so to know that they reached out to you, that's like beyond impressive that they thought that you were worthy enough to be on the show, because they can't just get some wimpy sissies on the show because it wouldn't make the show very good. So to have someone reach out to you, I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was very humbling.
Yeah. And I find that really cool too, because you and Donnie on Mud, Sweat, and Beards, you guys were like the prime example of hilariously getting along with each other. But how did the show go for Mud, Sweat, and Beards? Not like the casting portion, but how was it working in a survival situation with somebody else? Did you know Donnie before the show, or was it just like thrown at you for you guys to survive together?
Well, Donnie was also on the same season of Alone that I was on. So we met each other through the casting process, and then before we actually deploy, you're on the field, you're on site before you actually deploy Alone for a number of days, and so we had a chance to talk and get to know each other a little bit better. And so I knew who he was going into it, and had a lot of respect for him and his skills. Now I was always already following his YouTube channel and whatnot. And so when they asked if I would like to have the opportunity to work on him, as a pair on a survival show, I was like, yeah, like that. Like
No
Donnie
doubt.
Best is pretty much good anywhere, anytime, by himself. And so to be able to go out with him and and see what we could do together was just a pleasure and an honor.
All right. Well, now that we got some of the backstory out of the way, so yes, he has been on several TV shows. For those of you who didn't know, which I think is incredibly awesome, especially on the survival realm of things. Because growing up my whole life, there's a bug flying around me. Growing up my whole life, I watched like Dual Survival and Bear Grylls and those type of TV shows. So to be able to reach out and actually, by shocking astonishment, have you say yes to coming on the podcast. I was at a loss for words when you said that you were willing to come on the podcast, considering I only had one episode. Okay. Enough of the backstory. I know the people who follow the podcast are going to want to know the stories, the funny, the good, the bad, and the hilarious stories. So let's start with the good. In retrospect to any of the TV shows you've done, any of your personal experience out at your ranch up in Washington, what is some of the good stories you have?
Gosh. I'm one of those eternal optimists. So everything, either I win or I learn, which is a win anyway. So, there's really no bad. But, I told you the story about getting chosen for a loan.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I think a little bit before the time when I was alone, I actually had kind of put it out there. I got tired of city life and people for a while back in 2015, 2016. And so took my little trailer into the woods to live there. And I had to commute in for work, so I wasn't totally just disconnected. But that time was really about finding myself and finding my own peace and getting used to the idea that, hey, maybe there's not a partner in life for me, that my path might be alone, and kind of finding my peace with that. And, I went through that. And then when I came out of the forest, I felt it was a great experience, but I wanted the ability to like fully immerse myself in the forest. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of just threw it out to the universe, like you call it a prayer, you call it a wish, or whatever you want to call it, that, hey, I would like to have an opportunity to really immerse myself. Mm-hmm. And it was about a year later, I wanted to be able to immerse myself without having to worry about work and my kids and finances and all that stuff. And then about a year later, pretty much about the only way that could happen manifested in a loan. And so that was kind of my thought, my story about, manifesting the opportunity. Mm-hmm. But, out there, I went out there on a loan open. One of the things one of the perspectives I chose to take is that I'm a sum of everybody a sum of all my experiences, which include everybody that I've really ever come across in the world. So in turn, they're part of me. They're part of my experience. They're part of my existence within me. And so I kind of went open with that perspective there. And, I've got a lot of people understood the old crying over this, my friend squirrel situation. And actually, when I'm out in the field, it took me quite a while to kind of figure out. But I'll say that was not the only time I cried out there. I cried out there in that 19 days that I was out there, probably more than I've cried in that time period before. And it wasn't one of those things where I was dealing with my demons or anything like that. I kind of made my peace with myself and befriended my demons. But what it was is that I just had the opportunity to feel without distraction. So much of the time that we go about the world while we're in our homes and cities and more urban environments, when you have an issue or you start to get feels, you get your Facebook out or you go watch a funny TV, and you have a lot of things that are able to distract you from dealing with those feelings. And when you're out there kind of just opened up and kind of disconnected without those distractions, you have a lot of time to just feel. And I myself, I was an English major with a philosophy minor, so I tend to get alone, And when I want to really think and contemplate things, I go into nature. So to be immersed in that situation, I had a lot of deep thoughts, and it stirred up a lot of just feelings,
Yeah.
pretty balanced. Like, I cried only once for myself. Most of the
Hmm.
time, it was just like the energy of what's going on in the world. Like the fact that, wow, I'm starving on a loan, I'm eating every day. And, with
Uh-huh.
what I was able to forage daily, I was still eating more than most children in the world.
Hmm.
You think about that, in that from our perspective, I'm starving,
Yeah.
and I lost 30 pounds in 19 days, and so bona fide I was, but still
Hmm.
I was eating more than most children throughout the world, and it just kind of put those things in perspective. Uh, and you just, like I said, I felt things a lot deeper. And I didn't
Hmm.
leave because of the squirrel incident. It kind of flowed right into me leaving. I left because I got to the point where I looked, everywhere within about a mile and a half of my camp, and I saw no signs of
Hmm.
many food. The biggest things I saw were squirrels, and one of the things that people don't realize is you can't go there and just slay all the squirrels in that island. And I was on an
Yeah.
island. There's a certain amount that you can have, and that amount still would not have been close enough to sustain me. And without seeing some other type of food source there, it got to the point where, my best two options are to go home or to just sit in my shelter and wait until I got so thin that they removed me.
Hmm.
At 19 days, it's not worth it. I
Hmm.
know a lot of the previous participants had some long-term medical issues, and some are still dealing with them from letting themselves go
Yeah.
that far. So it was at 60 days, 70 days into it, you push through that. But at 19
Hmm.
days, then there's really not much chance of winning. I thank the universe for the opportunity, and I left there with it still being a good experience without
Hmm.
any long-term ramifications. And quite frankly, I think I left at that point, and people were still interested to see more without having to see my suffer fest. And so I think that probably opened the door to some of the other opportunities. Kind of left people
Yeah.
wanting more, they say, right?
Hmm. Well, and that's what a lot of people don't understand is in situations like Alone where you're out there and it's essentially it's a game show to see who can be the best at their survival situation. But like you're saying, there's only so much you can do in certain situations, and I've seen a lot of negative comments to people who have to tap out on the show. But it's
Mm-hmm.
hilarious because it's like, well, you weren't out there. You weren't in that situation. And most of these people, one of the guys that had a negative comment on me promoting having alone people on the podcast was saying that you guys aren't worth listening to unless you won the show. And I'm like, yeah, but you're sitting behind your computer shooting guns at a target. You're not out trying to survive. You're not out in
Mm-hmm.
those situations. And it just astounds me how much people think they know, but they've never actually experienced anything and gotten to do that on their own. But
I will say, definitely, everybody that has ever gone out on that show had the potential to win the show.
mhm,
There's a number of circumstances that just changed. I mean, it's as much about luck of the draw with what your location has to provide, and the team does a good job of trying to make them relatively even. There's all the elements of
yeah,
survival, kind of, but they're scouting months before they
mhm,
that the participants are out there, and anybody that spends time in the field knows that anything can change. I mean, throughout the course of the show, the food that's available to the participants changes, within that
mhm,
60-day period. And so if they're scouting another 60 days before that, like my location did have some caribou antlers and some moose sign and stuff like
mhm.
that, but it's also an island on a lake that's frozen over 9 months out of the year, and most of that was probably as though they crossed they
Uh-huh.
crossed there at different times of the year. So it might have looked fresher when they scouted it
Yeah.
because it had just thought out.
Yep.
So
Yep.
they do a good job. But yeah, I mean, everybody there has a ton of skill. But I mean, probably one of the most skilled people that was ever on the show. Not only did he not win, but he didn't have a ton of footage air on the show during his episode. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I said, that takes nothing away from the winners, because they did it when it counted, and they were able to find and had the right elements for them to win. But they don't put people out there that that don't have the potential to win it.
Yeah. And now in retrospect to being on a television show like Alone, you have to film yourself, correct? You have your own camera equipment. As somebody who goes out and explores, I'm not like in a survival situation or anything, but I myself find it kind of annoying to constantly have to pull my camera out and film things that I'm doing, even though this is like what I love doing. I love going out and filming. Was it more of an annoyance, or was it more of a distraction from the situation when you had to film what you were doing?
That's one of the things that I think they look for in casting, is that people need to be able to embrace the camera work. That's the cost. That's the trade-off for this opportunity. They give us an opportunity to go out and have this outstanding, amazing adventure, and pay us for it. But you have to film it, and filming it makes it, I say, 3 to 4 times more difficult as far as your energy expenditure is concerned. Because the analogy I like to give people is, if I want to climb a hill, I got to climb the hill, look at the route, see if it's something I want to film, climb down, set my cameras, climb back down, walk the hill for the cameras, climb back down, get the cameras, and then continue to do that for any time I want to film a sequence. And I'm having to carry all that extra camera weight around. So anytime you do something, and you pretty much, they want you to have at least one camera rolling almost at all times, just in case you just happen to be walking around and come across a fire. Just like, you should have generally one camera rolling. And so it's a lot of, not only your thoughts are not focused on survival, but your energy expenditure, makes it about 3 times as hard. Survival in and of itself is tough, not impossible, especially with the skill of the people that are there. But you add that filming element to it, and it makes it. I mean, not only do you have to do all the filming, but then you don't have anything to write with. They want you to use your camera as your diary, and so you find yourself opening up and exposing yourself, and dealing with stuff, or talking about where sometimes you might be able to, you got a daughter at home that you're missing, or a son, or your wife, or husband. You can kind of compartmentalize that and stay busy at times. But if you're sitting there and you have to talk about it, and that brings those feelings to the surface for some people. So the filming in and of itself makes it significantly more difficult.
Yeah. All right, well, let's let that be our leadway into the bad situations. And I know you said that there weren't many bad situations, but was there anything that was like potentially dangerous, or any injuries that have shown up during any of your survival processes, even if it's just not on a TV show, but in your personal life?
In the TV show, really, I mean, nothing significant that was a negative for me. And I tend to, like, the negative stuff just kind of tends to roll off my mind, so I have to think about it. But definitely, I mean, I've been in situations in my personal life, like, when I'm out roaming the woods by myself, it's way more dangerous for us, because I don't have a yellow brick. I don't have a satellite phone or a way to call in help. I'm out in the middle of nowhere by myself. And I've had a couple of situations. I think the most concerning one was an elk I shot a couple of years back, and I'm skinning out the elk, and I just said to myself, okay, don't make sure you don't cut yourself. You're back here in the back country. And just as I said that, I'm skinning out one of the legs, and somehow, I don't even know how, I stabbed myself in the leg. and I
Oh.
think I grazed one of my arteries because as I was looking down into this cavernous hole in my leg with a
Oh.
very sharp knife,
Uh-huh.
I could see just a little bit of blood, kind of, just a little, this
Mm-hmm.
not squirting, but the but the action of my heart pumping affecting the blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, ooh, and what do you do? I
Yeah.
put a bandage on it, wrapped it a little bit, and I still had elk to pack out of the fluids. So luckily, it was only about a mile back.
Well,
So and I had some buddies that were in the area that were able to help me. So we got it packed out, and I didn't go septic, and so that was good.
yeah, you're still here. That's all that
Yep.
matters.
Yeah, but normally I do my best to plan ahead. I
Mm-hmm.
do my best to kind of know what I'm going into and to make sure I have the right equipment for what I'm going into or the ability to improvise. I definitely can say that as I've developed and grown as an outdoorsman and doing some of this stuff actually help me grow
Mm-hmm.
and got me doing things that I might not otherwise have done to make me a better woodsman. Uh, but as I've grown, I find that I actually carry less because I
Yeah.
know that I can do with this or that or this.
That's yeah, I'm hope I never have to be in a situation where I end up wounded like that. But we do go out and I've fallen in the creeks, I've fallen into stuff, and uh I just in case, I don't do anything that would endure me getting injured, but I always have a venom kit and blood clotting kit and stuff for just in case, because
Yep.
you never
Yep.
know. You hear stories and you never know.
Mm-hmm.
But that elk story, it reminded me. I'll tell a little bit of a story of mine. My very first elk hunt. I think I was like 13 or 14 years old. Uh, I went out with my cousin and we were out scouting the woods and we saw a cow elk and her calf. And so I'm getting ready. We're following these elk, and right up to our left, this was in Arizona, were Mexican gray wolves. Either one or two. I can't remember exactly how many there were, but they had just recently released them a couple years prior to repopulate the forest because they had been hunted off. And they're big dogs. They're not a dog to mess with. And I shot my elk about 200 yards from where we saw it about 3 or 4 minutes later, and it was just at sunset, so I had to gut the elk. And while I wait for my cousin to go get his truck so he could come back in and we can get it out, and uh, me as a 13 or 14-year-old, I was scared out of my mind because I'm laying
Oh.
there. It's pitch black. I think it was 32 degrees out. It was windy. I was laying next to a dead, gutted out elk, and all I could think of was there's a Mexican gray wolf on the hill over. And so my mind was turning. I was terrified. It didn't ruin the experience for me. It just makes me laugh every time I think of it. But it was a fun trip.
Yeah, yeah. But what a pleasure and honor to see them,
Hmm.
when they were so rare, though.
Hmm.
But that
Yeah, I
doesn't
think
make you
they.
feel good when you're sitting on a dead elk.
No, no. Especially as a kid, I had my rifle, but I'm like, it's pitch black out. I don't have a flashlight. If I hear the wolf, what am I gonna do? You
Mm.
can't shoot it. They're a protected species.
Yep.
So, it was a win-lose situation if that wolf came over. But all right, uh, let's transition into the hilarious stories. So just alone on Mud, Sweat, and Beards, there's hilarious stories all over the show. If you guys haven't watched the show, go watch the show. It's really good. But what are some hilarious stories? Just funny things that have happened to you on TV shows anywhere. Just what's something hilarious?
Oh man. Well, like you said, like Mud, Sweat, and Beards, the whole idea of the show going into it is to actually show survival in a different format.
Hmm.
So instead of the doom and gloom sufferfest that you get on some shows, to actually show people that you know crap happens, but they're
Hmm.
having fun and they're working through it, and it's just part of the process. So God, I mean, I think yeah, we joked that on our first full day of shooting that pretty much 80% of our day was inappropriate jokes. Like we had a lot of fun. Funny stuff. God, most of the stuff. made film, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard to pick. I have fun every time I go, anytime I go out. Uh, Funny stuff. I mean, recently I've been doing some trapping, and I started trapping. Not that I really want to collect fur or trap fur for funds, but I started trapping so that I could be certified to be a wildlife control operator in the state of
Mhm.
Washington. So I could go out and deal with nuisance calls for people and charge a fee for it. And so one of the first things that I had to take out of a trap was a skunk. That I had trapped a skunk in my trap, and pretty cute little skunk, but and I let it go, and but I went up after seeing it, and I just pretty much opened up this trap door, propped it, and left. And so I'm thinking I'm fine. So I go into town just doing whatever because I didn't touch anything, didn't touch the skunk, it didn't spray me anything. And I'm walking around through the Goodwill. And then after a while, one of the Goodwill employees comes. He's like, "Sir, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." I'm like, "Why? Why?" He's like, "The skunk smell." I was like, "You can smell it." I was like, "I didn't touch it. Just being in the presence of this skunk." And I really wanted to be upset and mad, but I was like, I get it. Like, like I can't. I know at that point, like humans are animals that
Mhm.
the odor kind of your brain kind of starts to overlook it, so you don't
Mhm.
smell it yourself. But apparently, everybody in the store did, and it's the weirdest thing. I didn't touch anything. I didn't get close to it. Like just being in the presence of that little the odor of it stuck to me, and
It was I wouldn't say humidity because where you're at it's not humid, but like a really bad fart sticks to your
oh,
clothes.
yeah, it did. And I was in the store like an hour later, and I was like, ah. But that was a hilarious situation, and more. There was another time my buddy and I were hunting, and we're going over. It's a deer season in Oregon,
Mhm.
and we're just going over the hill, and all of a sudden we see these tails popping up over the hill, and I remember looking at him and saying, "Monkeys." And because I was like, there's this big curved tail through the animals, and I was like, no, there's no monkeys out here in Oregon, and it happened to be a cougar, a lioness with
Oh.
two fairly large cubs, not quite independent yet, but a lioness
Mhm.
with a couple of cubs, and yeah, but the funny part was that was my first thought, and we just because my brain didn't. It said monkey first because of the way the
Mhm.
tail was shaped, and they were just kind of bouncing up and down, looked like a monkey running, but they were cougars, and we actually got to sit down and watch them for a good 45 minutes. Like the lioness kind of walked them over. They went over to a tree, and
Mhm.
the kittens were playing like cats on a tree on a whatever the cat
Yeah.
poles that people have in their
Mhm.
home, just running and chasing up at each other up and down this huge tree. It was pretty impressive.
And just because it's there, I know the people who are watching the podcast are going to ask, why is there a raven above you?
Oh, that's Morgana. She's a crow,
A
and
crow.
my primary spirit guide animals are
Mhm.
ravens and crows, corvids, and since I discovered that, they just kind of tend to come to me, usually injured, and so she's about the sixth one. You can see her wings hanging down
Mhm.
there, and that's how we found her. She's actually getting to the point now where she's flying around a little bit better, so there may be an opportunity as she heals to release her.
Mhm.
But yeah, this is the sixth one that I've had, and I've released it. I released a number. A couple of them couldn't be released. One of them ended up staying with me for a year and a half before she died. But yeah, so I try to give them a good life, give them safe, and help them recover. So I take Morgana and we do some flying exercise. I'll take her to different places, and she'll fly on her perch and just get trying to get her wing. So hopefully I'll be able to release her at some point.
That's awesome. I know. I've just been watching her pace back and forth, and I was like, "There's got to be some reason," because I know she's wild, but she's like really well trained to just stay with you.
Yeah, well, she's just that's her safe spot. Like every now and then she'll fly off to different places in the house, and her she's got her own room in the house, and so sometimes she'll fly off, and she can't fly all the way to the room yet, but she'll fly over to the stairs and then just hop up the stairs and go to the room, and she's got a bird cage and stuff on there, and she can get up to the top of it, and like yeah, but that's where I put her just to get her out and have her around people. I mean, they're social animals, so
Yeah.
don't want them to leave them and locked in a room by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Want her to have some quality of life while she hopefully heals.
Yeah. And on the topic of animals, I've seen a couple of your posts, and the one post specifically, you were almost hand feeding deer that were on your property. Are they just a normal occurrence around your property?
Oh yeah, I live out in the middle of nowhere on the top of a hill. I'm 20 miles from the Canadian border, about 40 miles from the Idaho border in the northeast corner of the state. We got everything here. I think the deer that you're talking about they were actually they were neighbors' deer. The deer on my property, I feed them, but they don't seem to come. They don't get that. They haven't got that familiar with me.
Yeah.
Maybe because I don't feed them every single day. I put out food here and there, but the ones I was at were at a guy's property that feeds them every day, and he's set up a situation where they're close to they let him get close to him. So I was trying to see if I could actually pet him. But I'm a hunter and trapper, and I do believe that our wildlife populations definitely need to be managed. And legal, ethical hunting and trapping is a wonderful tool for the Fish and Wildlife departments to manage them. But at the same time, I'm an animal lover as well. I don't want to see any of these species wiped out of the ecosystems. There needs to be a good balance so that the ecosystem as a whole can thrive. I like to use the term homeostasis.
Yeah. And that's one of the main things, because I come from a whole family of hunters, and that's one of the main things. We like going out, and a lot of people don't realize that there's a limit to what you can shoot. We're not just shooting willy-nilly and killing animals. You have tags. You have essentially a lottery system in certain states. Only so many people can get a tag. From Arizona, I think it was only 1,500 elk at a certain year that they were giving out tags for. And they can do that much because they can't even guarantee that many people are going to get them. And so essentially you're probably going to lose about 750 elk. But
the national average for success rates generally right about the 20% range across the board for firearms, bows, and arrows.
I thought it was higher than that. Jeez.
No, it's generally about 20%. And so, they can expect, that they're out of 1,500 elk, they're only going to lose probably closer to 500 of them. But, it's 350 to 5. But and there's a lot of money from hunting and fishing and firearm sales that goes into conservation efforts. I mean, look, for most states, at least state of Washington, about 25% of the hunting tag revenue goes into is 25% of the Fish and Wildlife budget is from hunting, the sale of hunting licenses and tags. And then because of the the Pittman Act, that there's a percentage of all firearm sales that go into conservation efforts. Bows, I think bows and firearms. And so, hunters and firearm owners really are the main supporters of wildlife conservation efforts.
Yeah.
Financially speaking.
And let's go ahead and stay a little bit more on the topic of hunting, just because I know you're an avid hunter. Did you have anybody teach you, or did you teach yourself how to clean an animal and quarter it out and all that?
I grew up with my dad fishing a lot, and my dad wasn't a hunter much. But I met my best friend's family, and they were big hunters. And first time I cleaned out an animal, I pretty much
Mhm.
anatomically, there's a cavity you have to open. You got to get the stuff out, and so I think the first time I actually did it by myself, I was by myself, and I watched my buddy's dad do my first elk. I shot my first elk when I was 14 with a bow,
Mhm.
and my buddy's dad gutted that one out. And so the first animal was probably a deer that I shot by myself. I had to get in there and figure out, but like you done rabbits, you done everything.
Mhm.
Anatomically, you just scale it up a little bit and
Just bigger.
remove all the stuff that's bad. So it's part of once the hunt is the fun part. Once you actually
Mhm.
harvest something, that's where all the work begins.
Mhm. Yeah, I know. We the hardest part for us was always getting, because we didn't quarter them out as kids, because typically in Arizona there's a dirt road
Yep.
like every quarter mile, and so we would be able to just go put the elk or the deer, whatever we got, into the bed of a truck and just take it over. But it was always hilarious trying to skin them because we would hang them up on a winch, and my cousin, he's a hunting guide for northern Arizona, and so he's like gung ho, get it done, do everything correctly. And so if we were taking too long to skin out the elk, he would just jump in and take over, and it would be done in 5 minutes. And it was just
Yep.
hilarious growing up with avid hunters. And I'm not huge into hunting. I have killed elk in my life. I have gone out hunting, and we actually plan on going out python hunting because we're moving to Florida actually this weekend. To not just for the hunt, but to help because they are overpopulating the state. So we're
Right.
going to go down there and do our part and help the state. But I do like hunting, but I'm on the same side of you. I also love animals. So it's
Mhm.
like iffy for me. I'm not the type of person who could just go out and hunt just for the fun of it. If I'm hunting, it's because we want to harvest the meat and we want to actually have a purpose behind it. But
Yeah.
I know there's
And
a lot of people that hunt for sport, but that's
and I
them. I can't do that.
and I honor whatever reason. I hope that the people that hunt for sport actually utilize
Hmm.
the meat they harvest, whether it's for themselves or they give it to someone else. It's utilized. But I think this is my in the last year I've actually transitioned. I like when I'm hunting most big game, I'm hunting it for the meat. Uh,
Hmm.
but I'm also doing a lot more hunting now for the sake of conservation, to help with
Yeah.
that homeostasis in areas that mostly predator
Hmm.
populations are out of balance, and for a number of reasons they are. But so that we are the Fish and Wildlife's major management tool in that aspect. And not only
Yeah.
do we have fewer hunters now, we have fewer hunters that are willing to hunt predators. And
Hmm.
so we have and then you have a lot of legislation and laws and rules that like make it more difficult. And both in Oregon
Hmm.
and Washington, for instance, you can't run dogs, you can't bait bear, and so a lot of people just stop hunting them. And so
Hmm.
our fish and wildlife conflict officers in this area, especially, are they're call every day all year because
Yep.
there's so many predators, so much wildlife that is not it's lost its respect for
Hmm.
humanity, or the need to kind of be fearful around human establishments because they get a lot of positive reinforcement by nothing happening when they're spending time around human establishments because nobody's
Yeah.
pursuing them or scaring them or hunting them. And so, just doing some of that pursuit, kind of, I mean, harassing them a little bit when they're around human establishment to remind them
Hmm.
it's not safe, is actually a good management tool to at least keep them away from human establishments. Hunting them is really not
Yeah.
going to help control the population just because there's not a lot
Hmm.
of people that are willing to hunt them, but it changes their behaviors and makes it less likely for them to depredate and predate on around human establishments.
Yeah, and that's like us wanting to do the python hunting
Yeah.
to help with that population. Last time I heard, there was only like 550 certified python hunters in the state of Florida, which is nothing compared to the 350,000 pythons that are living in Florida. They need to have like 5,000 people on board to help with this python problem, because now they're finding them into the Miami area. They're getting into people's pools, and they're not small snakes. They're 14, 15-foot snakes that are doing this. And so if you had a toddler in the yard, there's nothing you could do about that if that's a hungry snake. And so I'm like, it's just scary because I have 3 boys myself, a baby and 2 toddlers. And we're moving to Orlando. So it's northern, but they have just found several breeding pairs of pythons right in Orlando. I totally understand it, yeah.
They're a huge ecological nightmare for the native animal populations. If we're looking to conserve and preserve those native species, they're the physiological design of snakes has not changed much over millions and millions of years because they are very efficient at what they do. And that will definitely,
They're very good.
and it's been a problem down there for decades, and it's just getting worse as the population gets higher. And there's simply areas that snakes are going to be in where people just aren't going to go. And so the population will probably never be eradicated. But again, it's a situation where you can control them to the best of, with a good program, people can control them to the best of their ability in the areas that are of most concern.
Well, it's awesome to hear that you're doing it for the conservation aspect, because we all love nature, we all love wildlife, and so to have it conserved and brought back to its original balance as close as we can, as much as we can help it, that's awesome. It's awesome.
I choose the areas I hunt based on that. Like when I choose to go hunt cougar, which cougar is also the best tasting thing in the forest. Whether if you've not tried it, it's like a small farm raised pork, but a little bit sweeter. It's literally my favorite wild animal food. And so not only is hunting them, I'm hunting them for food, but because the areas that I chose, and I choose hunting areas, like I don't hunt elk directly around my house because we had a big the herd that's around here. They lost a bunch of them when they fell through the lake a couple years ago, and so the herd population is not high around here right now. And I have elk across my property, but I don't hunt here. I shot 1 deer from around here, but I go to the areas. I try to go to areas with higher concentrations, not only to increase my odds, but because that's where harvesting an animal from is going to be more beneficial for the control. It's not going to have a detrimental effect on the population. And those numbers, as you look at for predators or your deer and elk, they're generally available through your fish and wildlife agencies. And it takes a little work, and you don't get to hunt that same spot that grandpa's been hunting for 70 years, but it's, I think, part of, for me at least, it's part of ethically and morally harvesting animals is to take them from areas where there's higher concentrations.
All right. That being said, I don't want to draw this podcast too much longer. But before we go, is there anything that you would tell the listeners, like supply-wise and survival-wise, that they should be prepared to have with them in situations of survival?
When you think about preparing for survival, I remind people to look at the rule of threes. The rule of threes is that you can last 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without warmth, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. And that's a general rule of thumb, assuming you're breathing. A lot of people, you look into your packs and that you carry extra water, you carry food. People give a whole lot of thought to the food and water aspect of it that you don't need to worry about for 3 days. One of the first things that I worry about is warmth, the ability to start a fire quickly. And so as people going out, and I want them to really think about it here, and near the coast range where everything is damp, we're a temperate rainforest. Even if you've got matches or a lighter, you may not get a fire started,
Yeah.
in the spring, fall, anything other than the summer. And even sometimes in the summer, it's moist enough that it's problematic. As you get to
Yeah.
the northern cold environments, like that 3 hours that you're going to be in trouble, maybe 1 hour or 2 hours or
Hmm.
only minutes if you get yourself moist. So that's one of the things that I really push people to remember, that the first thing that will kill you in the forest is exposure. So thinking
Yeah.
about your clothing first, that's your first layer of protection, that's your first shelter. And then thinking about keeping, even if it's a small tarp, but understanding that a lighter may not be enough. Carry a lighter by all means, it's easy,
Hmm.
but that might not, depending on where you're at. Arizona in the summer, you can almost look at it and
Don't lie.
it's gonna burst into flames. But carrying a way to efficiently get a fire going and stay warm is the first thing that I recommend. And you can do whatever you want for food. You can do it. There's many options for
Hmm.
water, but make sure that you have. In my pack, I usually have, the long burn matches. I usually have a lighter. I usually have a ferro rod, and most of the time, because of where I live, most of the time I have a propane blowtorch, because
Okay.
if I want a fire, I'm going to want it now, and that's
Yeah.
really the most that your source to ignite a fire is going to be your most important survival thing they'll be your most important item in a survival
Hmm.
situation. And
Yeah.
so I try to remind people to rethink that. All the rest of the stuff, you have plenty of options. You can do whatever you want for knives, whatever,
Hmm.
but make sure first and foremost that you have a good way to start a fire in any condition.
All right. Well, I'm sure a lot of our viewers will appreciate that, because I know a lot of the people who are following currently and going to follow are into the survival aspect of stuff. So thank you. I am going to call that good for this podcast,
All right.
though, just for time restraint. But thank you for coming on. It was an honor to get to meet you and talk with you and hear some of your stories.
And you as well. Thank you for having me on, and best of luck to everything. Best of luck to your move to Florida. May that go well for you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Well, see you later, man.
All right.
Have a
Take
good one.
care. Bye bye.
All right, guys. Well, that's it for this episode with Ray Livingston, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did, hearing his stories and his survival experiences. Make sure you guys are subscribed, because next week we are going to do a podcast with Donnie Dusk, the other participant in the show Mud, Sweat, and Beards. He's also been on lots of TV shows. But if you guys enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and I will see you guys on the next podcast.